In the darkest hours of World War II, over enemy skies, a grim reality was unfolding. Radio silence, static, then the heartbreaking declaration. 500 American pilots, presumed dead, declared killed in action. For their families, all hope was lost. But what if the official records were wrong? This is the impossible survival story of the men who fell from the sky and refused to die. They were the tip of the spear, a massive formation of American bombers flying deep into hostile territory. Their mission, to cripple the enemy war machine. But the enemy was waiting. Suddenly, the sky erupted in a storm of anti-aircraft fire. Explosions tore through the formation, ripping planes apart. Inside the cockpits, it was chaos. Alarms blared, smoke choked the air, and pilots wrestled with dying aircraft. The sky became a horrifying ballet of destruction. Wings sheared off, engines exploded, and massive bombers spiraled toward the earth. For the crew, there was only one choice: bailout. Hundreds of parachutes blossomed against the smoke-filled sky, descending into the heart of enemy-held land. From the ground, it was a massacre. Wreckage burned for miles. Back at headquarters, a devastating report was filed. No distress calls, no survivors. A red marker was drawn on the map, a tombstone for hundreds of young men. They were all marked, killed in action. But in the shadows of the smoldering forest, a handful of dazed and wounded survivors gathered, and one of them whispered the words that would define their future. Not dead yet. Their war wasn't over. A new one had just begun, the battle for survival. Hiding in dense undergrowth, they became ghosts. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves could mean discovery and death. Enemy patrols swept the forests, their dogs straining at the leash, hunting for any sign of life. The pilots were hungry, injured, and terrified. They tore their parachutes into makeshift bandages, tending to broken limbs and shrapnel wounds with grim determination. They drank from muddy streams, their thirst overriding the risk of sickness. Every moment was a calculated risk, a tiny, smokeless fire to cook a squirrel, a whispered conversation to plan their next move. They were so close to the enemy, they could hear their voices, smell their cigarettes. On one occasion, a patrol passed just feet from where they lay motionless, holding their breath, their hearts pounding a deafening rhythm. To increase their chances, the large group made a painful decision. They split into smaller teams, vanishing deeper into the wilderness. One pilot, by the faint light of dusk, scribbled a letter to his family, a letter he never expected to send. He wrote of his love, his fear, and his unwavering hope. As night fell, so did the freezing rain, soaking them to the bone. With no compass, they looked to the stars, navigating by ancient methods, driven by a single burning desire. "We'll get home," one whispered into the cold night air. Somehow, after days of relentless travel, they stumbled upon an abandoned small, rotten sanctuary. Huddled inside, they listened as enemy trucks rumbled past, the vibrations shaking the very ground they lay on. They were living on a knife's edge, but they were still alive. Their luck was about to change. A local woman, working her field, spotted them. In her eyes, they didn't see hatred or fear, but something else, compassion. She said nothing, gestured for them to follow, and led them to a hidden cellar beneath her farmhouse. This was their first contact with the resistance, a secret army of ordinary citizens fighting an underground war. On a candlelit wall, a map was pinned, crisscrossed with clandestine escape routes. It was a lifeline. The leader of the local cell, a man who had already lost so much to the war, shook the American pilot's hand. This handshake was a pact, a promise of life. The starving pilots were given bread and soup, the first real food they'd had in weeks. The resistance worked with incredible efficiency. They forged identity papers, turning American airmen into French or Belgian laborers. The pilots shed their uniforms for civilian clothes, practicing new identities, new histories. The plan was audacious, to smuggle them across hundreds of miles of occupied territory, through countless enemy checkpoints. A young courier, barely a teenager, memorized the routes and contact points, his mind a living map. Under the cover of darkness, the escape began. They moved through farmlands and silent villages. One night, a German patrol appeared out of nowhere. Just as they were about to be discovered, an old farmer hid them in his wagon, burying them under a pile of hay as the soldiers questioned him. Every person who helped them was risking not just their own life, but the lives of their entire family. This was the silent, heroic front line of the war. With the resistance as their guides, the great escape was truly underway. The first major obstacle was a wide, heavily patrolled river. They moved in a small wooden boat, paddles dipping into the black water without a sound. Suddenly, a searchlight from an enemy watchtower swept across the surface. They froze, exposed and helpless. The beam passed just over their heads, and they reached the other side, hearts still racing. The journey continued into rugged mountain trails. The physical toll was immense. One wounded pilot collapsed, unable to walk another step. Without hesitation, his buddy hoisted him onto his back and carried him. Disguised as local workers, they entered a village bustling with enemy soldiers. Their resistance guides, who had become their family, embraced them one last time. With waves and tearful goodbyes, the pilots crossed the line into freedom. The sight of Allied soldiers was overwhelming. There were shouts, cheers, and tears of disbelief. The dead had returned. Wounded men were rushed to medics, finally receiving proper care. Back at Allied headquarters, the news was met with shock. How was this possible? These men were ghosts. Telegrams were sent, and soon the most emotional reunions began to unfold. Wives, parents, and children who had been mourning their lost heroes were suddenly embracing them. Newspapers blared the headlines, 500 pilots saved from the grave. The world learned of the quiet heroes of the resistance, the farmers, the teachers, the doctors, the teenagers who risked everything for strangers. The survivors gave their testimony, piecing together the full, miraculous story. Their escape route, when drawn on a map, was a testament to human courage and defiance. For the pilots, the joy was mixed with sorrow for those who didn't make it. but they had walked out of the inferno alive, not just because of their own will to survive, but because thousands of strangers refused to let them die. Their story wasn't just about survival. It was about the incredible power of hope and the goodness of humanity in the face of absolute evil. This is the story they tried to erase. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more incredible, true stories from history that deserve to be told. See you next time.